I'm going to approach this as applying for a job, because I don't want to just represent you. I want to work for you in Washington, because there's a crisis coming. Some think it's a debt crisis. Some think it's a military crisis. Some think it's a judicial crisis or an immigration crisis. And while all these are very important issues, the crisis I'm talking about dwarfs them in its impact on you and your family. I'm talking about an economic crisis. An economic crisis that can threaten our standard of living, our leadership role in the world, and the quality of life for our future generations. The generations we'll never meet. Those people, those future generations are going to look back on us and say, what were you thinking to allow such a mess to happen after your parents left you such a wonderful America? This economy tanked 3 years ago, just crashed, and it's been flat ever since. Do you know that 9 of the last 11 recessions lasted less than a year? This one's been going on for 3 years now, and it's still not getting any better. Now, some people say, well, we're in a slow, jobless recovery. Well, what good is that? Tell that to the 1 out of 5 people who can't find a job or are underemployed. And just since March, this economy has lost another 545,000 jobs. And now comes the scary part. The massive debt you've been hearing about, it's still growing at $1 trillion a year. And Obamacare doesn't start until 2013. When that massive debt in Obamacare hits, what economic activity we've got going is going to be crushed. The last time we had a crisis like this was back in the Nixon-Ford Carter era. How many remember those years? All right. Back then, unemployment was running about 11%. We've been running 9 to 10% for the last 3 years. There were 4 recessions during those years. Each one lasted about a year. This one's been going on for 3 years now. But do you know what was different back then from what we've had right now? Does anybody know what's missing?
Good leader.
Well, that, yes. Inflation. Inflation back then got up to 15% a year. It was an incredible, crushing burden to everybody. Unbelievable what inflation like that does to you. We've been running 1 to 2% inflation for the last 3 years. And our government tells us, don't worry about it. Inflation's not going to be a problem for another couple years. Well, I don't know what stores they're shopping at. But when I go to the grocery store and I look at the faces of the people that are there, you see worry and fear as to how they're going to feed their family the way prices are going up. Milk, bread, eggs, margarine, vegetables, meat, everything is going out of sight. And that's just the retail prices. Commodity prices are something else. We watch the commodity prices in business. Cotton has gone up 77% in the last year. Corn has gone up 85%. And in the metals market, you think gold is going up in a good investment. Copper in the last 18 months has gone up 300%. When all this works its way through the system, inflation is going to start taking off. It got so bad back during the Nixon-Ford Carter eras. Mortgages got up to 17%. You didn't worry about what a house cost. You were just worried about what the payments were. There was an economist, a guy named Arthur Okun, who came up with an index to measure how we were doing on a monthly basis. Does anybody remember what that index was called? The Misery Index. Oh, what leadership we had back then. The Misery Index was a combination of unemployment and inflation added together. The worst it got was under Jimmy Carter in 1978. It stood at 22. You contrast it with President Bush in the last term of his office, he ran about 8.8. Now you hear about how things got better during the Reagan years, during Reaganomics. And yes, they did. But do you realize under Reaganomics, it still took 5 years before unemployment dropped below 7%? And it was another 5 years before mortgages dropped below 10%. That means that economic crisis lasted 17 years. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait 15 to 20 years for this economic crisis to pass. So what do we do about this? Well, if it was a military crisis, we'd go to the military. If it was a judicial crisis, we'd go to the judges and attorneys. If it was an immigration crisis, we could go to the law enforcement. But this is an economic crisis. And we need to go to those who live with the economy day and night, not just working in it, but the ones who take it home at night and worry about it, because they're not just worried about putting food on the table for their families. They've got to worry about providing a place to work for their employees so their employees can put food on the table for their families. I'm talking about the business owners. The business owners can't kick a problem down the road for someone else to solve. They know that blaming it on somebody else isn't going to do any good. They've got to get all the right answers out on the table now. Pick out which is the best right answer and then move. Solving that problem so they can move on down the road. So who am I to be saying all this? Well, most of you know me. I'm Vance Patterson, a neighbor of yours here in Burke County. I've been married 36 years to my wife, Mary Jo. I'm a father of 4. She's a mother of 4. I'm a businessman. I've started 16 companies in the last 30-some years. 2 of them made the Inc. 500 list for the 500 fastest growing companies in America. I currently own and operate 4 companies. All 4 of these companies got crushed in 2008 when the Great Recession started. But I'm proud to say that I've got the best employees in the world because we managed to turn those 4 companies around in less than a year. And all 4 are stronger now than when we went into that recession. Well, how do we do this? Well, it sounds simple. We did more with less. And we adapted. This is something our government needs to learn how to do. How to do more with less and adapt to the conditions, rather than just blowing ahead with what they've been doing for the past 20 years. I ran for office, as you know, 2 years ago. It was the first time I'd ever stepped up and gotten into politics. Ran for the U.S. Congress. Mike Unruh was my campaign manager. We ended up finished second in the field of 4. And we were very happy with the results. We felt we did a good job in spreading the message, and we're ready to pick up where we left off last time. Many people ask me what I've been doing since I ran for office. And I say, well, I've been trying to get my house back, because that's what we use to finance the campaign. That's what most Americans do. First, when there's a problem, they turn to their own resources, because they know that self-reliance gives them self-determination. Again, this is something our government needs to learn how to do. Can you believe America is borrowing money from a communist country? What in the world? When we were growing up, could you imagine that happening? And our economy depends on the Arabs over in the Middle East, regulating oil prices when we've got massive amounts of coal, oil offshore and up in Alaska. Natural gas, we could be the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and yet we're still dependent on the Middle East because of lack of leadership in this country. Self-reliance gives you self-determination. We need to get that back for us and for our future generations. Now, we'll never get the money back that we borrowed on our house. But we have gotten our house back, and that's something that makes my wife pretty happy, sitting in the sunshine today. Now, as I mentioned, I've got 4 companies. One of them makes industrial fans. We actually make things out of metal, ship them across the country and around the world. I am a manufacturer. My father and I started this company back in 1989. As I've traveled and done business around the world, I've learned the cultures of different places. All across in the UK, all across Europe to Greece, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Central America, South America, China. And I've learned how important it is to know the cultures of those countries before you negotiate with them, before you do business with them. Real quickly, an example would be when I went to Russia. I set up a joint venture in Moscow to manufacture our fans over there back in 1995. We were going to ship our materials over there, do the final assembly there, and then sell and market into Eastern Europe that was just opening up. Well, I got over there, went over by myself to negotiate what's known as an agreement of cooperation. This is Russian. Well, I went into the conference room, beautiful conference room, big heavy wooden table, sat down with 8 Russians. There was sales, marketing, engineering, legal, accounting, my counterpart, president of the company. We all sat there, and for 3 days we worked on this agreement. Now, they would make a proposal, and I wouldn't agree with it. So I'd sit there and have to think of something to do, something to say back to them. There were times I'd sit there 30, 45 seconds. Fortunately, the Russians are fairly patient. But they made a comment one time that something that I did not want to do. And I sat there and thought, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to do this. This deal is blown. And after about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, I finally just pushed back from the table, got up and walked away. And it turned out to be the exact right thing to do. Everybody else got up and said, yes, we'll take a break. We moved into the other room, ate some hard salami, some cheese, some bread, drank some plum juice, then went back and started talking again. At the end of the 3 days, we put the agreement together, and it was a good agreement. This is something our government needs to learn how to do. When they're in a negotiation with another country, their job is not to save the other country. It's to do what's best for our country. Because when America does well, often the rest of the world does well. They need to learn how to push back from the table and say no. Another area of culture, just real quickly, would be dealing with Brazil. You hear that Brazil is passing us up in the world economy. If you're sitting at a table negotiating with Brazil, and you get up and leave, and you leave your camera sitting there, and you come back and I've got your camera. I didn't steal your camera. I was just more clever. See, because before you had your camera, and now I've got it. In Brazil, that's not stealing. It's just being more clever. You need to know that when you're negotiating in Brazil. They're not dishonest. It's just a different culture. In China, you sit down with the Chinese and you negotiate, and they agree to do something, and then you go away, and the time comes for them to do it, and they don't do it. And you say, well, you said you would. Well, what you come to find out is that it's more important in China for them to save face, both for them and for you. They don't want to tell you no because they want to save face. They'll say yes to just about anything, having no intention of going through with that. You need to know this. Our government needs to know this before they negotiate these agreements with the other countries. One of the things I learned in Russia was that I was the only American in the room. And when I got up to leave, the deal was off. And that was important to them because in the global economy, if you're not doing business in America, you're not a global player. We need to remember that. This coming election should not be a popularity contest. It shouldn't be a beauty contest or even a political contest. It should be a moment of clarity, like Ronald Reagan had back in the last economic crisis. He said, America's best days are ahead of us. He had this foresight to see beyond the problems that we had, and knowing that with American ingenuity and American work ethic, we could accomplish anything. And he was right, and he was a strong leader and led us to do it. The Democrats right now would have you believe our best days are behind us. I don't want to have that feeling. I don't want to pass that on to our future generations. Can you imagine having to live and say, boy, you should have seen it back when we had it? It was great. Too bad it's not that well now. This election should be a moment of clarity where each of you glimpses the potential that our district has for a return to prosperity with a strong leadership and a plan. We don't have to wait on the rest of the country to turn things around. We don't even have to wait on the rest of the state. Heck, half the state doesn't even know we're out here because we're on the other side of I-77. We don't have to wait on them if we've got strong leadership with a plan and a passion to step up and work that plan. This coming election should be a moment of responsibility where each of you looks at the list of candidates and decide which candidate you want to have working for your family. If you were spending your own money, which candidate would you hire to, first of all, step up and confront Representative Schuler on the issues and return this district to the conservative Republican column? And then hopefully, is that the same candidate who is most qualified to go to Washington and work in our district to rebuild our economy, bring jobs and prosperity back for our families? It's not just a matter of going to Washington and voting right. Anybody can do that. If it was just a vote, we could mail it in and save $1.5 million to $2 million a year. You need to hire somebody who has the experience, the foresight, the passion, and the ability to do an economic turnaround and confront the liberal progressives on their issues and put a stop to this craziness that's been going on. I'm Vance Patterson, a neighbor of yours here in Burke County. I support tax reform. The flat tax, fair tax, or the 999, or any combination of them, is better than the unbelievable mess we've got in our tax system right now. I believe in the Second Amendment. I've been a gun owner since I was 6 years old. And if I had a right to have a gun when I was 6 years old, how could I not have a right to have a gun now? I believe we should renegotiate and roll back NAFTA and CAFTA and negotiate it on terms that are best for the Americans, not the other countries. I believe we should stand up in the United Nations and remember who we are and who's funding those United Nations. We're the only Americans in the room. The rest of the world does need us because we are the center, not only of the global economy, but free enterprise and freedom in the world. Now, why am I running? I have the ability. I have the knowledge and experience for negotiating nationally and internationally. I have the foresight to see the economic crisis coming at us and the passion to step up and turn it around and lead in the right direction. I have a degree in economics, and that together with 38 years business experience means I know how the economy works on our level. All I ask of you is for your support to help me go to Washington, to work for our district, to work for the prosperity of our families. All I ask is for you to have that moment of clarity where you see the potential our district has for return to that prosperity. All I ask is that moment of responsibility when you go into the voting booth, the privacy of that voting booth, that you look at the candidates and decide which one you want to hire to work for your family. I'm asking you for this job. I'm asking you to vote for me and hire me on May 8th. Thank you.
Hip hip, huzzah! Hip hip, huzzah! Hip hip, huzzah!
Thank you, Vance. We have a good group of people out here, and I know that we support you, appreciate your words. From the campaign, once again, my name is Mike Unruh. I am the campaign manager. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me afterwards. We have some sign-up sheets over here, some information sheets. Feel free to take a yard sign with you. Feel free to take some shirts with you that are on the chairs. We have buttons on the table over here as well. And once again, thank you all for coming. I see some folks from Henderson County, some folks from Caldwell County, folks from McDowell County, a lot of neighbors here in Burke County. Yep. Thank you and have a great day.